Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hola, ¿me escuchan? Sí.
Okay, should I get going, or is it going to be an introduction?
No, you can introduce yourself if you want.
Okay, hello everyone. I can't see how many people are listening to this, but I'm hoping that we've got an audience. My name is Jennifer Johnston. I am a British opera singer, specifically English, which matters when we're talking about Dido and Aeneas. And I'm a mezzo-soprano. In fact, I've sung the role of Dido in Purcell's opera a number of times through my career. The staff have some photographs of me in a production at the Festival d'Aix-en-Provence in France, which they will put up on screen. It's a role that not everybody has the chance to sing. I was very lucky in the early part of my career. I sang it in the Festival d'Aix-en-Provence in Madrid and also in Lille. And then in later years, I also sang the role of the sorceress. In fact, in some productions, the same singer can sing both roles, but I've never done that, thankfully. That's quite a big job. I am coming to you tonight from England, sitting here in the country where Henry Purcell, the father of British opera, lived and worked only really a long time ago. He wrote Dido and Aeneas in 1689, so hundreds of years ago now. And it really was his only full opera that he produced. The Baroque period was a time of awakening, really, for opera as an art form. Really, Dido and Aeneas is probably considered the most important English opera composed before the 20th century. He's really considered to be the father of English opera, of British opera. He wrote Dido and Aeneas also in an unusual way. Most opera during the Baroque period was written to commission from the royal courts of Europe. Composers such as Mozart and Handel would be paid great sums of money to write opera to order. And it was similar in England. Composers were hired by the monarchs of the day to write masques, masques spelt M-A-S-Q-U-E-S, an early form of sort of staged performance, kind of like theatre with music. And the sort of form of opera developed out of those masks. Now I'm going to let the translator have a go at translating what I've just said before I go any further.
Okay, hola, mi nombre es Jennifer Johnston, estoy muy agradecida de que estén aquí, no sé cuántas personas me están viendo, espero que haya una audiencia. Bueno, yo soy una cantante inglesa, mezzo-soprano, que tuvo la oportunidad de interpretar a Dido en la producción inspirada en la obra de Henry Purcell. He tenido la oportunidad de interpretar a Dido, como también he tenido la oportunidad de presentar la obra siendo la bruja. Hay producciones donde la misma cantante puede ser Dido y la bruja. No he tenido la oportunidad de hacerlo, pero hay oportunidades donde la obra se presenta de esta manera. Yo creo que Henry Purcell es el padre de la ópera inglesa y bueno, esta es la obra más importante de la historia de Inglaterra. Y quién mejor para contarla que una cantante inglesa. Eh, y bueno, les voy a mostrar unas imágenes donde van a poder ver que tuve la oportunidad de interpretar a este personaje. Y bueno, hay compositores que han formado parte de la música inspirada de Mozart.
Okay, so Dido and Aeneas, written in 1689 or thereabouts, was not written for the royal court. Instead, it was written for Josiah's priest, a man who was known as a dancer, really, a dance teacher. He commissioned Henry Purcell to write Dido and Aeneas for his school for young gentlewomen. At that period in time in England, there were some schools that admitted girls, women. And so all roles in this opera were likely to have been performed by girls, except the role of Aeneas. And we, in fact, don't know who sang Aeneas in its premiere.
Okay. Esta obra, que fue escrita en 1689 por Henry Purcell, en este caso no fue escrita para la corte real, sino que fue escrita para un profesor de danza que trabajaba en una escuela de danza para mujeres. Entonces, esto nos dice que la obra de Dido y Eneas fue, la primera vez que se hizo, fue mayoritariamente interpretada por mujeres, excepto por el personaje de Dido, que no sabemos quién fue el que lo interpretó.
And much like we don't know who sang Aeneas, we also don't know what the original opera looked and sounded like. All we have, and what we know of the opera, comes from a 17th century copy. That includes a sung prologue and a spoken epilogue, which would have been spoken by an actor. Both of those things aren't normally included in contemporary performances. Instead, they're very much of their time. What that means is that they stylistically were very different to what a modern audience would expect to see. The score itself has been through various editions and iterations during its life. But the version we mostly use today is the 1974 Lorien Dart edition, which in my score looks like that.
Bueno, no sabemos cómo se vio la producción porque fue en el siglo XVII, como también no sabemos quién hizo el personaje de Eneas. Lo que sí sabemos es que el prólogo fue cantado y el epílogo fue hablado. Esta es la manera que la producción se hizo. Y bueno, la música de la obra ha tenido muchas alteraciones y muchos cambios, pero la que más conocemos es la producción de 1974.
So we have an opera that we're not sure what its original form would look like, but the central part of the opera, which is what we perform still today, tells a very clear story. And it's a story that rests in Greek legend, in the legends of the very distant past. In the original legend, Greek legend, Dido is the wife of Sichaeus, who is killed by her brother Pygmalion. Dido then runs away to the coast of Africa, where she buys a piece of land from a man called Iarbas, a local chieftain, on which she founds Carthage, a city-state, essentially, which became highly prosperous. As the queen of that city, she became very wealthy. And so Iarbas, who had sold her the land, then desired her hand in marriage. He wanted to marry her. But she didn't want that, felt threatened and intimidated, and so she kills herself to escape from him, stabbing herself on a funeral pyre which she has constructed.
Tenemos una ópera que no sabemos cómo fue, pero sabemos que la historia central de esta ópera viene de la mitología griega. En la historia original, en la mitología griega, Dido es la esposa de Siqueo, que es asesinado por su hermano Pigmalión. Y bueno, ella huye a la costa de África, donde se compra una tierra de Yarbas, que se la compra a Yarbas, que es un local de esa tierra de Cartago. Cuando ella llega, Yarbas desea casarse con Dido, pero en realidad ella decide suicidarse para escaparse de él. Ella se apuñala en un funeral donde ella había construido.
So when Virgil came to write the Aeneid, the story of Aeneas, essentially, and the Trojans and all of the other legends that we know of more clearly today, thanks to his text. It was 2,000 years ago now that he wrote this. He wrote it between 29 and 19 BC, so before Christ. So really a long time ago. He decided to reshape the story to make Dido, instead of marrying Iarbas, she was a contemporary of Aeneas. And Aeneas is the man whose descendants eventually founded Rome in Italy.
Ok. Cuando Virgilio escribe la Eneida con los troyanos y la historia que conocemos gracias a él, hace 2000 años o 29, 19 años antes de Cristo, él decidió cambiar la historia para hacer que Dido fuera contemporáneo a Eneas, que sus descendientes fueron los que fundaron Roma.
So the Queen of Carthage, Dido, this very mythical queen, falls in love with Aeneas after he lands in Carthage. And in the story that Virgil writes, he attributes her suicide at the end of her story to her abandonment by him, by Aeneas, at the command of Jupiter, the king of the gods. And her dying curse on the Trojans in that story provides a mythical origin for the later wars that happened between Rome and Carthage.
Bueno, como él cambió la historia, él pone que Dido se enamora de Eneas después de que ella desembarca en Cartago, y Virgilio, la razón del suicidio de ella se debe al abandono de él en el comando de Júpiter, que es el dios de los planetas. Y bueno, su muerte maldice a los troyanos y genera el inicio de la guerra entre Roma y Cartago.
You'd think that was enough. However, Purcell, who lived 1600 years after Virgil, decides that the story by itself needs a bit of additional help from some extra characters. In Purcell's version, there is a sorceress, a witch, who manipulates events to separate Dido and Aeneas from each other. She doesn't appear in the Aeneid. She is a theatrical construct in Purcell's version, and must be seen really as a dramatic device.
En la versión de Purcell, que fue muchísimos años después, él consideró que había que hacer otros cambios. Entonces introduce otros personajes. En vez de hablar de los dioses, decide hablar de la bruja, que la bruja es la que manipula los eventos para separar a Dido y Eneas. Y bueno, esto le dio como el carácter dramático de la versión de Purcell.
At the time Purcell lived in the 17th century, definitely in Britain and probably in other parts of Europe, there was a hysteria and a fear about and for witches. And the fear that people lived in of witches was so prevalent in society that they ended up being written into Shakespeare's Macbeth, as well as this story, giving them a contemporary relevance to those in the audience when they're watching Purcell's opera.
Purcell, que vivió en el siglo XVII, nos muestra que en ese contexto había un temor muy grande por las brujas. Y ese miedo que vivían fue tan fuerte que terminaron escribiéndolo en Macbeth y en esta historia de Dido y Eneida, dándole una relevancia al contexto que estaban viviendo en el siglo XVII.
There is also a belief that the opera that Purcell wrote is a commentary on the overthrowing of King James II in England. And he was replaced on the English throne by William and Mary. Dido is supposed to symbolize the English people, and James II is supposed to be symbolized by Aeneas, who nobly follows the decree of the gods to fulfill his destiny.
También se habla que en la ópera que escribió Purcell se trata del derrocamiento de William II y que cuando fue cambiado por William y María, Dido simboliza a la gente inglesa y James II es Eneas.
It should also be noted as a sort of footnote that the sorceress in her music in the opera refers to somebody called Elissa, which was in fact the Phoenician name for Dido. Instead, she is referred to as Dido elsewhere, which is in fact a Libyan name meaning wanderer, which I suppose describes her journey to Carthage in Africa.
También cabe acotar que la bruja en su música, en vez de hablar de Dido, habla de Elisa, que ese era el nombre fenicio de Dido. Dido es un nombre libio que se refiere a aventurera o curiosa, habla de las maravillas.
And whilst the opera is a tragedy, it does have its lighter moments, especially the first sailor's song, which is a message to young women not to succumb to the advances of and promises made by men, which is presumably a message also for the young girls in the school that this opera was written for.
Mientras que la ópera es una tragedia, también tiene momentos livianos, como las canciones del marinero, que habla de las mujeres y cómo ellas no deben sucumbir a las promesas de los hombres.
So if we now look at the Virgil's version in a little bit more detail, it will help us later on understand what Purcell was looking at in terms of the characterization of Dido.
Si miramos la versión de Virgilio, podemos entender que Purcell está viendo otra caracterización al personaje de Dido.
So, in Virgil's story, Dido, Queen of Carthage, and Aeneas, the Trojan, fall in love when Aeneas arrives in Carthage, only for Aeneas to abandon her to fulfill his destiny in Italy.
Entonces, en la historia de Virgilio, donde Dido era la reina de Cartago y Eneas el de Troya, podemos ver que se enamoran, pero que él decide abandonarla para cumplir su destino en Italia.
Dido views his departure as a total betrayal and is heartbroken, leading to her suicide. She sees it as a personal rejection and a sign of her own failure, especially after she had abandoned her duty to Carthage for him.
Dido mira este acto de partida de Eneas como una traición y lo ve como algo muy personal y por eso se suicida. Sobre todo cuando ella abandonó su mandato en Cartago por él y como él no hizo lo mismo por ella.
Overwhelmed by grief and shame, she builds a funeral pyre, lies on it with Aeneas' sword, and kills herself.
Abrumada por el dolor, construye una pila como una especie de funeral y toma la espada de Eneas y se suicida.
In her final moments before she dies, Dido curses Aeneas and his descendants, wishing them ill and hoping they will suffer the same pain that she feels.
En sus últimos momentos, ella maldice a Eneas y a sus descendientes y desea que ellos sufran el mismo dolor que ella sintió.
Since Dido kills herself, her soul is not allowed to be accompanied to the underworld by Mercury. So instead, the goddess Juno, the wife of Jupiter, sends Iris to release Dido's spirit.
Desde que ella se suicida, su alma no va al inframundo de Mercurio, sino que Juno, la esposa de Júpiter, libera su alma.
In essence, Dido's suicide is a tragic consequence of the gods' machinations, Aeneas' duty, and her own emotional vulnerability, and highlights themes of love, betrayal, duty, and the power of fate in Virgil's epic poem.
En esencia, el suicidio de Dido es una consecuencia de las decisiones de los dioses, la traición de Eneas y la vulnerabilidad de Dido. Eso lo podemos ver que forma parte como la tragedia, la traición y distintas emociones en la épica de Virgilio.
So that's Virgil. That's the version that Purcell had in his hands on the day when he decided to write this opera. He commissioned a libretto that told the story that Purcell wanted to tell, which is a little bit different, actually, from Virgil's original.
Entonces, esa es la versión de Virgilio que tenía Purcell para escribir. Y que, bueno, a partir de esta versión, él decidió escribir algo distinto.
So if anybody's going to watch Dido and Aeneas at the festival this week, the opera falls into 3 acts. Act 1 takes place in Dido's court in her palace in Carthage.
Si alguien va a ver la ópera en el festival, bueno, se divide en 3 actos. El primero se lleva a cabo en la corte de Dido en Cartago.
We find that the heroic prince Aeneas has fleeing the destruction of Troy and has been driven by storms to the coast of Africa, where he's arrived at the court of the Queen of Carthage, Dido. But he is destined by fate to end his wanderings in Italy, where he will found a new nation.
Encontramos que en este acto, Eneas se va y se encuentra con tormentas yendo a África, mientras que Dido está en la corte de Cartago y él encuentra su destino en Italia.
In Purcell's libretto, he doesn't define what fate is. He leaves that up to the audience to decide. And later he'll explain more using the role of the sorceress. So we'll come back to that.
En la versión de Purcell, él no define lo que es el destino, lo deja a la opinión de la audiencia. Y después nos hablará más del personaje de la bruja.
So Act 1, Scene 1. The opera opens in the palace, and Dido speaks of the fact that she is feeling highly unsettled, and she sings, "Peace and I are strangers grown." In other words, I'm not at peace, I'm feeling very anxious, and I don't really know why.
La ópera abre en la corte y Dido canta porque se siente muy mal. Y en la canción habla de cómo siente una ansiedad que no puede controlar.
Dido has already developed feelings for Aeneas, but she worries that she is pitying him because of his struggles, the overthrowing of Troy and the journey to Carthage that he's had to make.
Dido ya tiene sentimientos por Eneas, pero ella se preocupa que sienta lástima por las acciones que le están ocurriendo en la vida de Eneas, como su viaje a África y el problema de Troya.
Belinda, who's her confidant and is referred to as her sister, and it's possible her real sister, urges Dido to put aside her worries and give in and allow herself to love Aeneas and for him to fall for her too.
Belinda, que es su amiga o su hermana, es muy posible que sea su hermana, le dice a Dido que deje de lado sus preocupaciones y que deje sentir amor por Eneas, que se entregue al amor.
Aeneas openly asks to love Dido, and he openly says to her that they should be together. And as she appears to accede to his request, to say yes, the chorus comes in with a huge rejoicing scene and a triumphing dance.
Eneas le dice a Dido que lo ame y que deberían estar juntos. Y apenas Dido le dice que sí, entra un coro victorioso en la escena y un baile de victoria.
So the second scene of Act 1, Scene 2, in other words, we hear thunder, and where before everything's been light and happy and joyful, suddenly it's interrupted with a change, not just of scenery, but also of weather. And the scene changes to the cave of the sorceress and her 2 witches.
En el segundo acto, o la segunda escena, escuchamos truenos luego de este baile victorioso y canciones triunfantes, lo que cambian todo en la escena. Vemos cómo cambia el clima y una vez vemos esto, nos introducimos en la cueva de la bruja.
It's clear from what the witch sings that she hates Dido. Not explained why she hates Dido, except that she says that she hates all who prosper. In other words, anybody that is successful. And Dido is the ultimate success story. Here she is, having just bought some land in Africa and established this city-state of which she is now queen. So she is basically the antithesis of the witch.
Es claro por lo que canta la bruja que odia a Dido. No explican por qué, pero sí explican que ella odia a las personas que prosperan. Y Dido, luego de su viaje exitoso y ser la reina de Cartago, se diría que es la persona más exitosa, demostrando que la bruja es la antítesis de Dido.
Because she hates Dido, she proposes bringing about Dido's ruin and the ruin of Carthage, which she would like to see go up in flames, by driving Aeneas away.
Como ella la odia, la bruja propone destruir a Cartago, quiere verla en llamas, y la manera de que lo quiere hacer es llevándose a Eneas.
She decides that she and her witches will first create a storm to break up the royal hunting party that is happening, and then will send one of her helpers disguised as Mercury, one of the gods, who will then command Aeneas to leave Carthage and continue his journey to Italy.
Ella dice que sus brujas crearán una tormenta para arruinar la fiesta real y que mandará a una de sus asistentes para hacerse pasar por Mercurio, que Mercurio en este caso le dirá a Eneas que debe irse a Italia.
That's in real terms the representation of fate, what the players in the opera, what the characters in the opera believe to be the gods at work. In Purcell's version is in fact the sorceress disguising her helpers as the gods. So she replaces the gods, in fact, in Purcell's story.
En la representación de Purcell podemos ver que esta es la manera en la que describe al destino. Se trata de la bruja, ella está reemplazando el destino porque ella con sus planificaciones reemplaza a los dioses. Entonces la bruja es el reemplazo de los dioses.
What that does as a device is it makes Dido the light and the sorceress the dark. Dido good, sorceress evil. Dido the representation of womanhood, and the sorceress the representation of all of the rest of humanity, in other words, men, really. This constant battle between two sides of the same coin.
Eso hace que Dido sea la luz y la bruja la oscuridad. Eso hace que Dido sea la representación de las mujeres y la bruja la representación de todos los demás, o en este caso, los hombres. Es esa batalla constante de los dos lados de la moneda.
So then the witches prepare their spells in their deep cave, and that ends Act 1.
Entonces, las brujas hacen sus hechizos en las cuevas y así terminamos con el primer acto.
So then in Act 2, we've come from this quite dark, foreboding music into a pleasant day's grove in a forest where Dido and Aeneas and their parties are hunting.
Venimos de una oscura música a una música calmada en un placentero bosque, donde vemos a Eneas y a Dido, donde ellos están en una fiesta con sus amistades.
Suddenly, the skies cloud over and we hear thunder again, which is the sign of the sorceress. And And alarmed, Dido and Aeneas and the rest of their hunting party rush back to her palace.
De pronto, el clima se pone nublado y hay trueno. Ya sabemos que se trata de la bruja. De pronto, Eneas y Dido y sus amigos, con mucho miedo, corren al palacio.
So the sorceress's helper, in the guise of Mercury, appears and holds Aeneas back in the forest and tells him that Jupiter, or called Jove in this little bit of the story, means the same thing. Jove is commanding Aeneas to leave Carthage and continue his journey to Italy that night.
Las brujas confabulan con el plan de hacerse pasar como Mercurio, y entonces en la huida de ellos al palacio toman a Eneas por la espalda y le dicen: tienes que irte a Italia esta noche misma.
Aeneas himself is devastated. He will obey the gods, or who he thinks are the gods. In other words, in fact, it's the sorceress's helper. But he deplores his fate, and he wonders, what language can I try my injured queen to pacify?
Eneas está devastado por esto, ya que él siente que debe obedecer a los dioses y no sabe en qué idioma hablarle a Dido para explicarle lo sucedido.
So then this monumental event leads to Act 3, the harbour at Carthage. Instead of going back to the palace, Aeneas's crew are ordered to prepare to depart. And the sorceress and her two witches watch the preparations and plan their next move to create a storm on the ocean for the ship. And then they dance, a presumably evil dance.
Entonces, este evento hace que vayamos al acto 3, donde vemos que Eneas, en vez de volver al palacio, junto con su armada, deciden que tienen que prepararse para irse a Italia. Entonces, las brujas confabulan su nuevo plan, del cual ellas quieren crear una tormenta para el barco. Entonces, las brujas comienzan a bailar, un baile malévolo.
Having given the order to get his ship ready, Aeneas goes to Dido at her palace and tells her that he must leave.
Dando las órdenes para embarcar junto a su armada, Eneas decide ir donde Dido y decirle que tiene que irse.
He is very torn. He offers to defy the gods, but Dido accuses him of being faithless and deceitful and using the gods as an excuse.
Eneas está devastado y cuando llega con Dido le dice que le ofrece desafiar a los dioses, pero entonces Dido le dice que está utilizando los dioses como excusa. No cree en la palabra de Eneas.
She is so deeply offended that she doesn't allow him to stay. She sends him away, but knows full well that doing that, she will then kill herself once he departs.
Ella está tan ofendida que ni siquiera lo deja quedarse en el palacio por esa noche. Lo manda a irse. Está tan ofendida que una vez Eneas se vaya, ella cometerá suicidio.
Left alone at the palace with Belinda, once he is gone, the broken-hearted Dido sings her famous lament, When I Am Laid in Earth, asking for her sister to remember her, and then the chorus invites Cupids to watch over her tomb for eternity.
Sola en el palacio, con Belinda, su hermana, ella está muy triste y decide cantar su famosa canción de lamento. y le pide a su hermano que la recuerde y que le pida a Cupido que vigile su tumba por siempre.
So it's different. Virgil's version and Purcell's versions are a little bit different. There's a lot in Virgil's story that is not in Purcell's, not least the level of detail. At the end of the opera, it is not shown how Dido kills herself. She sings the aria. The chorus sings about Cupid's watching over her tomb, but it's left open to interpretation for directors as to where they take it.
Bueno,
Yeah.
podemos ver que las versiones de Purcell y de Virgilio son muy distintas. Tienen cosas en común, pero tienen muchos factores distintos. Como por ejemplo en la versión de Virgilio, podemos ver que el acto del suicidio no es explicado. Simplemente ella canta su canción, su famosa canción de lamento, y luego está a libre interpretación del público.
An interesting question arises looking at the contrast between the Virgil and Purcell versions.
Una pregunta interesante aparece al ver el contraste de las versiones distintas de Purcell y Virgilio.
At the time that Virgil was writing, women, whilst they had positions in society that were not as strong as current day, they were in a lot better position than in the 17th century in England.
En el momento que Virgilio escribió esta obra, las mujeres tenían posiciones débiles en la sociedad. Como podemos ver, Purcell en el siglo XVII tenía una sociedad más establecida para las mujeres.
Women in the 17th century were second-class citizens, subject to their fathers from birth, and later handed over like chattel to their husbands.
En el siglo XVII podemos ver que las mujeres eran ciudadanas de segundas. Eran básicamente entrenadas y criadas para ser entregadas como borregos a los hombres.
Demands were placed upon them with regards to conduct and virtue, which they were expected to uphold at all times or be judged accordingly.
Los hombres tenían que hacer caso y tenían que cumplir con estos mandatos de la sociedad o ser enjuiciados de tal forma.
Women were born to serve men. It was their vocation. And these doctrines were used by men in order to dictate how women should act.
Las mujeres nacieron para servir al hombre y con esto la manera en la que debían actuar.
In Purcell's version, therefore, to have risen to the position of queen, then forsake her people for love, only then to be betrayed, equals that she feels shame and believes herself to have no option but to kill herself.
En la versión de Purcell, al ponerla como reina y al poner a las mujeres como hombres, al igual que los hombres, para después que ella solo terminara suicidándose.
In Virgil's version, Dido's suicide is a tragic consequence of the gods' machinations. She believes that she has to follow their plan for her.
En la versión de Virgilio, el suicidio se debe por culpa de los dioses, en donde Dido tiene que hacer caso al plan que le tiene preparado el destino.
In the Virgil version, Dido does not feel shame.
En la versión de Virgilio, Dido no siente vergüenza.
It therefore is important, as a singer preparing the role of Dido, that every ounce of nobility that you can find in the text of Purcell's opera is retained.
Por eso es importante como cantante de ópera que cada fragmento de nobleza en la versión de Purcell sea tomada en cuenta.
The audience feels the tragedy if they feel that she has no choice, that being a great leader is not enough, and that death will come as a release.
La audiencia siente la tragedia si sienten que Dido no tenía opción, que ser una gran líder no es suficiente.
The final scene, if handled correctly, shouldn't be about shame. Instead, it should be about love, and it should break the audience's hearts.
En la última escena, si se hace bien, no debería ser de dolor ni vergüenza. Debería ser de amor. Y si es así, se les romperá el corazón.
Many great singers of the past have portrayed Dido, but the greatest of all, I believe, is the performance of Dame Janet Baker, who sings Dido's final aria, one of the most famous moments in all of opera ever written, When I Am Laid in Earth, and they will put the video on now, so you can see it.
Muchas cantantes del pasado han hecho de Dido, pero sin duda alguna, para mí, la mejor es Baker, quien canta su última canción de una manera perfecta. Les pondré el video para que lo vean.
It's a very simple story and it's very simple music, but she made it into something absolutely monumental.
It's the emotional quality that she brings to it, and this outpouring of help me. It's almost going to break out of such sorrow.
So you can see there one of our greatest ever opera singers, an English opera singer, performing Dido as a role from Glyndebourne in the 1950s. The thing that always is emphasized when you watch her perform this role is, as I say, it's not about shame, it's just about love.
Aquí pueden ver una de nuestras mejores cantantes en este video, que es del año 1950, que una de las cosas en las que más quiero enfatizar y la gente más habla de esta presentación es de que esta canción no se trata de vergüenza ni dolor, sino de amor.
That means that I've come to the end of what I wanted to talk about. All I would say is that for anybody going to watch the opera, the fact it's being performed in 2025 in Caracas in Venezuela, when it was written in the 17th century, shows that it still has a relevance today. The story still has a relevance, and I hope you all really enjoy it. If you've got any questions, please go ahead and ask them.
Bueno, eso quiere decir que he llegado al final de todo lo que quería decir y que bueno, que si van a ver la obra en el festival y que una obra del siglo XVII que se esté haciendo en 2025 en la ciudad de Caracas significa que tiene una relevancia muy importante en la sociedad de hoy en día. Y bueno, si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, estoy abierta a responder. Okay, let me check if in the chat we have any questions. Okay, we have some questions in the chat.
Okay, let's do one at a time.
Yeah, okay. Actually, they were from a long time ago, but I was translating. So let me do some of them. Okay, like for instance, we have Marilyn Viloria said, which character do you prefer to play, Dido or the sorceress?
Definitely the sorceress. It's always easier to play an evil character.
Ok, ella dice que definitivamente, a la pregunta que era, ¿qué le gusta interpretar más, a Dido o la bruja? Y ella dice definitivamente la bruja. Siempre es mucho más fácil hacer un villano. Okay, I have another one. This is from Danielis Suárez. Okay. Okay. Thinking about Purcell's audience was so different than today's. Do you think that the tragedy of Dido could be perceived as the same as hard from the audience? Like, do you think the audience would perceive this tragedy as hard as they used to do it?
No, I think we perceive tragedy differently today. People live longer today. In the 17th century, conditions meant that people didn't live as long and very often wouldn't even survive into adulthood. So these great stories of tragedy of kings, queens, gods, and so on, they were entertainment, but the value of life was different. I think people are more sort of persuaded by tragedy today and take it more seriously.
Ella dice que, tomando en cuenta la pregunta que hizo Danielis, que de la tragedia de Dido, si es más fuerte en el público de Purcell o el de hoy en día, ella dice que el público del siglo XVII percibía la tragedia de una manera mucho más distinta, porque hoy en día nosotros vivimos mucho más. Ellos lo veían más como un entretenimiento, ya que algunos ni siquiera llegaban a la adultez. Entonces, ella dice que nosotros nos vemos mucho más persuadidos por la tragedia. Claro, esta es su opinión. Okay, I have another one from Danielis Suarez. Well, it's in English, actually. There it is, the one. What main message would you like us to take as an audience from Dido and Aeneas?
That a woman can be a queen and not kill herself over a man. I think Dido kills herself for a different set of reasons. At least I have to think that when I'm singing it as a role, because she's stronger than just giving up her life because a man has left her. So yeah, I think as a performer, you have to have a series of thoughts in your head, which you never tell the audience. You instead have to express thoughts and emotions through the music, and you do that in a way with this opera, this role, that does not make Dido look weak.
Ok. El mensaje que ella nos pide al ver Dido y Eneas es que, bueno, que una mujer puede ser reina y no tiene que suicidarse por un hombre. Que ella cree que Dido se suicida por distintas razones, o que al menos ella como intérprete le gusta pensar esto, ya que el público no sabe lo que está pasando por su cabeza o las razones por las que Dido se suicida, sino que ella tiene que transmitirlo de una manera emotiva para que el público lo reciba y para que Dido no se vea como un personaje débil. Okay, we have another one. This is from Sulmari, and the question is, what is your favorite moment in the history, in the story?
Oh, I don't know. I think as a performer, my favorite moment is inevitably singing When I Am Laid in Earth, which is, of course, so famous that most people have at least heard it if they don't know it well.
Okay. Ella dice que obviamente su momento favorito de la obra es al final cuando ella está cantando When I'm Laid in Earth, que es la canción más popular de la obra. Ella dice que es un momento muy poderoso. Ok. Aquí tenemos, we have another one. Is there something about Dido that you identify with when playing her?
She is a true leader, and I think that we should all admire women through history who've done something different, who've struck out on their own. Just because the history of the world is so dominated by men, it's so extraordinary in not just in this opera, but also in the Aeneid and other texts, to see a female monarch who is important not just to her people, but in the world at large.
Ok, le pregunté que si hay algo del personaje Dido con lo que ella se identifica, y ella dice que se identifica con lo poderosa que es la mujer, que Dido en este caso es la reina de Cartago, y que le parece muy poderoso el hecho de que un mundo que siempre ha sido gobernado por hombres pueda ser gobernado por una mujer, como en este caso lo ha Dido. I have another one. This one's in Spanish, so let me read it for 1 second. Okay, it says, at the end, when Dido sings, When I Am Laid in Earth, it's an iconic song. Could you comment about the musical structure and how Purcell manages a devastating effect with simple resources? That's the question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah.
The thing about repetition in opera is that if you repeat text, or even the music itself as well, and in this case it goes round twice, there's an opportunity to colour it differently the second time. And in this case of this aria, it's the first verse twice, then the second verse twice. And so with each time anything is repeated, either you can emphasize it or you pull away from it. And it means there is a huge emotional journey that's possible.
Ok. Bueno, ella dice que en esta canción de When I Am Laid in Earth se utiliza mucho la repetición y que en la ópera la repetición es algo muy importante. Ella dice que el primer verso se repite 2 veces y el segundo verso se repite 2 veces. Entonces, ella cree que la manera de hacer un efecto tan devastador es dándole una intención distinta a cada repetición de los versos.
The other thing that's notable about it is that the aria opens with a very, very straightforward, simple melodic device. It's a downward scale in a minor key. And because it's descending in a minor key and is really beautiful, it sets the mood and the tone for what's to come.
Ok, ella dice que la canción abre con una melodía en escala menor y como va descendiendo en escala menor hace que el ambiente se preste para una tragedia o para algo triste y devastador. Okay, let's see if we have another question. Okay, we have another one here that says, it's from Julie. It says, Dido dies for staying true to her convictions, which makes her a moral heroine, a symbol of sublime dignity, to die with honor rather than live in humiliation. It's more like a comment than a question, I would say.
Yeah, no, but I agree with that. That's basically that's summarizing essentially what I've been trying to say.
Ok. Julie dijo que Dido se muere por mantenerse, por seguir sus convicciones, que eso lo hace una heroína moral y un signo de dignidad, que ella prefiere morir con honor que vivir en humillación. Y bueno, ella está de acuerdo con este comentario. Okay, we have another one. This is from Melba González. Do you have any inspiration or reference to work with? Do you have any reference or inspiration to develop the character of Dido? Like any inspiration, reference?
I think the best way to answer that is to talk about how I prepare a role, because at the end of the day, references are all fine, but I have to stand on the stage and perform the role as if I am that person. Acting, it might be. But the only way you can do that really is by firstly thinking through who she is as a person emotionally, and then taking her through her journey in an honest way, which makes sense to an audience, making sure that her emotions are clear. So we signpost what we want the audience to think and feel.
Ok, la mejor manera de hablar de este tema, en este caso de referencia o inspiración, es cómo me preparo para ser un personaje. En este caso en específico, ella, cuando está en el escenario, ella hace que es el personaje, ella cree que es el personaje. Entonces ella lo que intenta hacer es intentar pensar cómo se siente ella, cómo es su manera emocional de ver la vida y tratar de ser lo más sincero del personaje posible para que el público pueda recibir esto de una manera sincera.
The other thing in opera that is impossible to ignore is the role of the director, because we work in collaboration as part of a team. So in one production, there may be a belief about Dido that may not exist in another production, and you have to work with the director of the individual production to form the character that then fits into the rest of the story the way that he or she would tell it.
Bueno, otra cosa que quería agregar de este tema es que, bueno, hay que tomar en cuenta la figura del director. Nosotros al final estamos trabajando en colaboración con el director y uno puede ofrecer su grano de arena, pero el director al final es el que instruye al artista o da su perspectiva de cómo es la obra. Okay, we have another one. If someone has never seen this opera, what's the first thing they would tell them to pay attention to understand and enjoy it?
I think the best thing to really enjoy is the witches and the sorceress, because the similarity with Macbeth is very real. So there's an influence from Shakespeare there. But also, who doesn't love a bit of magic?
Ok, yo le pregunté, si alguien no ha visto esta ópera, ¿cuál es la primera cosa que les dirías a esa persona que preste atención y que disfrute? Y ella dice que, las brujas es lo más interesante de la obra, porque, bueno, habla mucho de Macbeth. Siente que hay una inspiración muy grande de Macbeth, de Shakespeare, y que además, ¿quién no disfruta ver magia en el escenario? I could see, Jennifer, that you enjoy the witches a lot. That's very clear to me now. Okay, we have another one. And it's, do you think, witches fan club here, they wrote that. Do you think Dido and Aeneas could be represented in any like time, modern time, or it should be always a classic?
No, I'm of the belief that, you know, a modern production is just as valuable. These stories are eternal, and the fact that it was written in, well, the original Virgil story obviously is over 2,000 years old, but also the opera was written in the 17th century. It needs to speak to today's audience. So whatever that means in the hands of a director, whatever a director needs to do to make it relevant and interesting to a modern audience is fine by me. What I don't like is where a director disregards the opera and lays over the top of it a story that doesn't make any sense. That can be visual, it can be a costume issue, a set issue, but if it's truthful and honest and straightforward and contemporary, that's great, because then it's about storytelling.
Ella dice que no hay ningún problema con hacer la ópera en cualquiera de las épocas. Ella dice que sí, que de hecho si Virgilio hizo la obra hace 2000 años y además la ópera se hizo en el siglo XVII, con más razón deberíamos hacerla útil para la época que vivimos. Lo único que a ella sí no le gusta es cuando pasan por encima de la ópera, cuando puede ser ya una cosa de vestuario o de el montaje, pero que mientras sea sincera, ella está muy bien con la producción. Okay, ¿tenemos otra pregunta? ¿Por acá? Queremos saber si tienen otra pregunta. We're waiting to see if we have another question. Okay, let's check. Oh, we have a lot of love for the witches, apparently. I think it's always, well, I think it's very interesting always to portray the evil character, right? It's fun. It's really fun to be.
Oh, it's much more fun to be evil.
Yeah.
For sure.
Que es mucho más divertido ser malvado que ser protagonista. Bueno, ¿tenemos otra pregunta o cerramos? Estoy aquí esperando. I really like history. Okay. I don't know if we have any other questions. Jennifer?
Okay. Well, if nobody else has anything they want to ask me, then
Oh no, we have just one other question. Can we see any video? Like, where can we watch a video of you performing?
the role.
Yeah, or any role. I guess
Well, I mean, you can watch. I mean, just have to Google me. There's plenty of clips floating around. There was never a video made, as far as I know. I mean, there might have been, but of my performances as Dido in any of the productions, I don't think that I was ever filmed. So I've only had photos, unfortunately. But other things for sure, you can go and watch. I mean, I wouldn't sing Dido again, I don't think. I'm older now. I would sing the Sorceress again. But Dido tends to be cast as a young woman.
Ok. Bueno, nada, ella dice que si queremos ver sus videos, simplemente tienen que googlearla, pero que de Dido no van a conseguir nada, lamentablemente, y que ella probablemente no interpretaría a Dido de nuevo, porque, bueno, ella siente que es un personaje que tiene que ser hecho por alguien bastante joven. Ella dice que si tuviese la oportunidad, volvería a ser el personaje de la bruja. We have the last two questions. Últimas dos preguntas, una es de Melba y la otra de Julie. Y terminamos con Jennifer. Okay, do you have any recommendations for this weekend to watch Dido?
Other than going to see it live in Venezuela, in Caracas, you can do a journey on YouTube where you can watch a range of different singers sing the role, and actually quite worth doing that, because I think it demonstrates how different we all are that have sung it, how different we all sound, not least. Also, productions have changed as time has gone on. I mean, I showed you a video of Dame Janet Baker in the 1950s. I'm much younger than her, so the productions I did were very different. So just go and have a look on YouTube and see what you can find.
Ok. Bueno, ella dice que aparte de ir a verla en vivo en Caracas, Venezuela, que busquemos en YouTube y que veamos las distintas intérpretes que hicieron el rol, porque van a entender que es muy distinto dependiendo de quién lo interprete. Ok, última pregunta de Julie, the last question by Julie. Could we also relate Dido to Antigone?
Yes. In fact, there's a number of legendary heroes, in fact, who like Phaedra is another one.
Okay.
They all end up committing suicide. The other thing you can relate into that is, in fact, it's the Japanese culture of happuku, which is ritual suicide. That there's this thing in that period of history in 2000 years ago where suicide had a different meaning, I think, in a way. So that is another layer. It's quite complicated to go into all of that. That involves layers of history that I would take me several hours to go through. But there are definite themes relating to all of these women, and Ariana and Naxos as well is another one. That they all have these themes of being strong women brought to their knees by a man and then committing suicide.
Sí, ella dice que Antígona y Dido pueden ser relacionadas, de hecho también Fera, ya que, bueno, todas ellas cometen suicidio, pero entre otras cosas también en esa época los japoneses, hace 2000 años, hablaban del happaku, que también es el suicidio, y cómo lo veían de una manera distinta. pero en general, como mujeres poderosas terminaban en suicidio de manos del poder del hombre. Okay, so yeah, that would be it. Thank you very much, Jennifer. It was very inspiring. We are all very excited to watch Dido and Aeneas. And well, thank you very much. We hope you come to Venezuela one day and sing live to us. And
I'd love to.
I don't know if you want to say something to the audience.
No, thanks very much for turning up. I don't know how many of you are out there because I can't see on my screen. But thank you for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, I'm sure if you forward them to the festival, they can ask me to answer them separately. But for now, thank you and bye.
Ok, bueno, muchas gracias a todos por venir, no sé cuántos me están viendo, pero bueno, gracias por ver, y bueno, nada, espero que disfruten del festival, y que si tienen alguna pregunta que pueda responder por separado, yo se las responderé. Well, así terminamos con esta presentación. Well, bye Jennifer, thank you very much, it was a pleasure, and have a good day.
Muchas gracias.
A ti. Bye.